Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. Today we have a very special first-time guest, Wayne Fears, author of The Pocket Outdoor Survival Guide and over 30 other books on outdoor living, as well as over 6,000 articles in outdoor magazines and other publications, well known for decades as an expert on outdoorsmanship, hunting, and survival and rescue. Wayne Fears has experienced survival both as a survivor and a search and rescue official. He was extensively trained in survival skills by the U.S. Army and Air Force. As a wildlife professional, part of his job involved search and rescue, especially for missing hunters. He's taught survival classes for various organizations, and he's here with us here to talk to us about not only outdoor survival, but what transferable skills from lessons learned in that realm can be applicable to others, even if you're sheltering in place or if you need to evacuate and bug out from your existing home and have very little time to plan what to take with you, or in fact, if you do find yourself in the outdoors and needing to be able to survive in a very difficult situation. So, Wayne Fears, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I did a quick recap of some of the highlights of your career, but if you could just introduce yourself in your own words so that our people understand, our viewers would be keenly interested in knowing where you amassed this background of knowledge and how it is that you've come to know so much about these topics that we're going to be addressing tonight.
Well, I grew up in a survival atmosphere. My dad was a trapper, and I grew up living in the backside of nowhere, and a lot of my education came from being on a trap line with him. So we ate the game that we caught when he was trapping, and we didn't have electricity for the first few years of my life. And so the pioneer lifestyle, I was fortunate enough to get to grow up in that to a certain extent. And I got real lucky and got in a Boy Scout troop and had a scoutmaster when I was a teenager that was very much interested in survival, and he picked up where my dad left off. And during high school, I joined the National Guard just so I could make some extra money more than any other reason. And I became interested in the military side of it, went in the Army, spent a few years there, where everything we did was built around survival. And once I got out there with the Vietnam era GI Bill, I finally had the opportunity where I could afford to go to college, and I decided to go into wildlife management. And I did my undergraduate work there and worked on my graduate degree in wildlife management. And part of my work started off in places like the Okefenokee Swamp, where you've got people that are lost on a pretty regular basis, and survival was just part of the job. You had to be able to survive to go do what we did. And that's just been that way all the way through my career. And at one point, I decided I wanted to try my hand at writing, and writing became a much more lucrative field and it gave me the freedom than being a wildlife biologist. And by being a writer, I could live where I wanted to, stay secluded. Nobody had to know where I lived or what I did or how we prepared. So that's kind of my lifestyle.
You didn't mention when you glossed over your Boy Scout career that you reached the rank of Eagle Scout at age of 15.
Yeah.
That's a rare accomplishment at that age.
Yeah, I was real proud of that. I was eat up with scouting, the Pioneering Merit Badge and Survival Merit Badge and Wildlife Management Merit Badge. All of those just intrigued me no end. By the time I got into the Army, I knew land navigation better than our instructors did. So it was just a great background for a poor country kid to be able to learn all of these skills, never knowing that the world was going to go the way that it has gone. So late in life, I'm real proud of all that.
And for good reason.
Yeah, we live that lifestyle here. So, and I pass it on to my children and my grandchildren, and we're prepared for whatever.
in that regards, if you could, one way that I imagine we could take a walk through this, a lot of what we've talked about here on our channel involves people making either financial preparations for a potential collapse, but also how they can become more independent on raising their own food and other aspects of home protection. But if you could take us out somewhere we haven't been on this channel, and that is, if you could start with a scenario of someone finding themselves in the outdoors without extensive supplies along, and what are some of the very key and critical elements, both from a practical standpoint and a sort of mental preparation standpoint, that you emphasize with people on what's most important to survival in the outdoors, and then taking that as a worst case scenario, if we could then back it up one step closer to home, and that would be if people had to leave home in great haste to get to if their normal location where their home is not safe, but they needed to get to a safer location, but they had very little time and very little that they could bring with them. But it'd be one step back towards a more ideal situation, because you can at least take some things with you. And then if we could take it the third step and right back into their own home, if for some reason there was some emergency, disaster, collapse of some kind, and they needed to shelter in place in their own home, what would still be some of those lessons that you'd bring in that would still be applicable, that would be some of those same things that you would learn in outdoor survival, but here you could apply them where you have more resources closer at hand. So if you're willing to walk us through in those steps, if we could first start with the top topic of at least a couple of the books that you've written specifically deal with outdoor survival. So could you tell us what are the most essential elements to successful outdoor survival, both from practical, mental, and so on?
Well, first and foremost, there's a common thread that runs through every bit of everything you just said. Regardless of whether it's backcountry survival, where you're out there, you're lost for 72 hours, and they finally find you and they bring you home, or whether you have to shelter in place because of horrible weather that destroys your communication systems and transportation systems for 10 or 12 days, or whether it's an EMP event where you're pushed back to the 1300s and you may be there from now on. The one thing that's common that goes through every bit of that is preparation. And in preparation, there's two parts to it. It's training, having had the training ahead of time. And the second part of it is planning. Are you prepared, and have you planned for all these different events based on your lifestyle? So to start with, from a backcountry standpoint, we try to encourage people when we're doing survival courses, whether it be for a Boy Scout unit or whether it be for a prepper group or whomever, is that you always try to get some training. You know, taking someone out, dropping them off, and say, we want you to exist out here on your own for 72 hours and not give them any training, any preparation of any kind. That's a pretty hopeless situation, and usually it doesn't end very well. So the thing I try to encourage everybody to do, regardless of what they think the survival situation they may get into, is first get some basic training. Begin to learn little simple skills. Most people in today's world couldn't build a fire if they had to. Even if you gave them matches and a can of kerosene, a lot of them have trouble building a fire. How do you build shelter? Shelter is important. How do you deal with finding water? When you find the water, is it potable? And if not, what do you do about it? Learning to overcome fear. Learning to be alone maybe for the first time in your life. A lot of people in today's world have never truly been alone other than in the bathroom by themselves or in their bedroom, and that's about it. So you're dealing with a lot of emotional issues that people need some training to deal with in a survival situation. Then they need to begin to build the skills. You got to learn how to shelter, regardless if it's in your own home and there's a storm coming, or whether you got lost when you were on a picnic and suddenly you're going to have to spend the night for the first time ever by yourself in the woods. How do you shelter? How do you signal? What's the best ways to signal? Are you prepared to signal? Do you even have a clue how to signal? So that just falls in from being prepared for, as training is concerned, to being prepared. Do you have the items with you, and do you normally carry the items with you that you may need to survive? We think of people having bug-out bags. Bug-out bag is a different thing to different people. Where I live in the South, we have a lot of tornadoes. And tornadoes have taken where I live, so that we've gone anywhere from 7 to 10 days, no communications, basically no transportation, because nothing worked where you could get any fuel. And people that got caught in those situations that were 30, 40, 50 miles away from home, they didn't have in their vehicle what they needed to make a night in their vehicle. And if they needed to walk home, they didn't have anything, especially if the walk required 2 or 3 days. They weren't prepared to do it. So having the right equipment, having the right training, and part of that training needs to be to go out and do a few of these things themselves. Even with the prepper groups that I work with, I like to start them off with some basic backcountry survival. And what we do is we have several classroom instructions where we let them build a survival kit. And this survival kit is designed strictly to survive for 72 hours, because most people in North America are found within 72 hours from the time they get lost or get stranded. And then once we assemble this survival kit, they put it together. We teach them how to use each item that's in the survival kit. How do you build a fire? 2 different ways, maybe 3 different ways. How do you build a shelter? How do you put up a tube tent? How do you build a lean-to? How do you find a rock overhang? Whatever the situation may be. How to deal with hypothermia. This is, in all the years that I've found a fair number of dead hunters, especially hypothermia, got, I'd say, at least a third of them. And so once we go through all these skills to use the items in this survival kit, the first thing we have to do is try to teach everybody they're not going to starve to death in 72 hours. Food's kind of low on the priority. Finding water, finding a suitable place to shelter, finding a suitable place to signal. These are much higher priorities in a backcountry lost or stranded situation. And then we take these people out, drop them out on Saturday morning, and leave them by themselves. They're not with anyone. Leave them there for 24 hours and come back on Sunday. Then we score the camp. What did they do right? What did they do wrong? A lot of them have already found us and said that they couldn't do it. They couldn't spend the night by themselves. And then we have a class, a debriefing class, on how do they fight all of the fears they had. And if people are honest with you, there's about 10 or 15 fears they probably had just spending a night like that by themselves. So that whole training kind of runs all the way through whatever short-term or long-term survival situation you're going to find yourself in. Now, granted, if we had, say, a cyber attack that wiped out the power grid in North America, we're looking at you're going to have to survive 5 to 10 years probably. And that pushes you back to the 1300s. And that's long-term survival. Then you get into pioneering skills. Then you get into gardening. Then you get into hunting big game and small game and edible wild plants. How do you handle human waste? How do you obtain your water and have a safe water supply? And how do people in today's world even deal with that mentally, which is, I find, to be the biggest problem. Did that begin to answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to developing those direct skills that are going to be useful for outdoor survival and building a essential survival kit that'll help you in that, just so that people they can imagine, I think, some of the elements that you would think are important in such a kit, but just what are some of the key things? Surprisingly, to some people, you mentioned that food is not going to be a top priority. You talked more about shelter, heat, and water. What kind of supplies would people need to make sure that they do have close at hand in order to ensure those?
Yeah, the survival kit that we recommend and we generally do our teaching around is about a 2-pound survival kit, and in it is a tube tent. And the reason we use a tube tent is simply because a lot of these people are not going to be able, even with training, to build a lean-to or find a natural shelter that if it should come a hard downpour during the night, they're going to get wet. They're going to get real wet. So we teach them how to use a tube tent. A tube tent is something pretty easy to carry with you all the time. So you've got shelter. Then we usually have a space bag as a part of the survival kit, and that came out of NASA and the space industry. And you just crawl in it. You got to be real careful. Your boots can tear a hole in it, but we tell them to take their boots off. You can get in this space bag, and it keeps you warmth around your body, and it folds up into a pack about the size of a pack of cigarettes. Then we have about 2 to 3 different ways of building a fire. We have a waterproof match safe in there with strike anywhere kitchen matches in it. And we generally will have either a flint and steel kit or we'll have a magnifying glass. And also we'll have in it is some fire tinder. Most people, like I say, can't build a fire, and you've got to use tinder because they don't know how to go out and find tinder. And a lot of times, no matter how much training you got, finding tinder is a very difficult thing. So you've got your tinder, you've got your spark source or your matches, your magnifying glass or flint and steel, whatever. Then we generally will have them pack in there tablets to treat water with. And I like to put a sheet of aluminum foil in there where we teach them to take that aluminum foil, and you can use it for signaling. You can use it for making a pot to boil water with. You can use it for cooking game, or if you catch fish, you can cook fish in it real easy. And these are the kind of things we try to have. We assume everybody has a knife on their belt, so we don't include a knife in the survival kit, but we do encourage them to always have a knife with them. So that's kind of a basic kit that we use for this 72-hour survival course.
Would it be significantly different if if a person were going to be leaving from their home, they knew that they have to evacuate their home, and they therefore would be able to have access to more supplies than maybe what would just be in your 72-hour survival kit? Is there anything additional that you would say if people do have the ability to bring more, what would be that additional thing?
Yeah, in my wife's car and in my car both, we've got fairly large day packs, which we have 3 packages of MREs in it. We have a number of things in there that is designed for your comfort for a longer period of time, and where you're not trying to survive for 72 hours. You may make your way to a shelter, for instance, and there's still not sanitary supplies. So do you have toilet tissue in your getaway bag? We generally will put a garbage bag in there in case you have to make your own temporary latrine and things like that, a small shovel. You try to think about your situation. What are your needs? A lot of people, it's medication. A lot of people don't think about it, but if you depend daily on medication, you want to have medication ready to go so that if for some reason you had to leave your home and go to a public shelter somewhere or go to a retreat in the mountains or whatever your situation is, you need to have prepared your getaway bag based on what your needs are. I could sit here and talk all night, and I can guarantee you I would miss a lot of people on what their needs are.
One of the things that surprised me a little bit on your 72-hour backcountry survival kit was you didn't talk about compass, maps, things specifically for orienteering. Is your main expectation that people who are lost are going to have to find a way to signal so that they can be rescued by others who are looking for them?
First thing we teach people always is once you realize you're lost or you realize you're stranded, hunker down, right? It's the best place you can find right there. It's the people we've had the most difficult difficulty in finding and took us the longest to find were the ones that thought they were orienteering experts and they were going to find their way out. And generally they get further and further away and deeper in trouble when they try to do that. If we could get all these people we have to look for every year, once they realize they're in trouble, just stop, hug a tree, get comfortable, and we'll get you pretty quick. So we don't encourage, most people, I hate to say this, but most people, when they got a compass, the only time they ever look at things when they're lost. Well, it's too late then. Knowing where north, south, east, and west is probably not going to get you out of your situation. So, again, in these backcountry situations, we just tell people, hunker down, stay put, because we can find them pretty quick. They'll do that. But if somebody wants to get scared and run all night long, it takes us a long time to find them, and they're usually in rough shape or dead when we do find them.
If someone has the ability to stay in their home, even if there's a electrical outage that's extended, or some other storm damage, or some kind of other collapse situation or disaster situation, what additional preparations do you recommend that they have made in their own home, if they're going to be able to stay in their own home, to make that a place that's going to be habitable for them in extreme situations?
Well, first and foremost, if you're going to build a new home, build it so that you can live in it without being on the power grid. That's the first thing. But most people can't do that. So the next thing you got to do is you got to have a backup for everything. If you have an electric range in your home, an electric oven, and that's basically the way you do your cooking, then you better be thinking about getting you a gas grill. You better be thinking about learning how to cook on a Dutch oven. You better be thinking about how to use a reflector oven. Do you have a fireplace in your home? Do you have hearth cooking skills? If not, you need to go somewhere and learn hearth cooking skills. Same thing with water. Do you store water? Well, we keep a lot of water around here because water is the first thing to get people in trouble. You can go a long time without eating, but after about the second or third day without water, you start getting into trouble. And I think the wildest I've ever seen people get is people that were starving for water. And so you got to have backup systems for everything. Have you ever thought about in your home, can you shut off, let's say you have a fireplace in your great room, can you shut off all the bedrooms and everything, bring the sleeping bags or blankets and sleep in front of the fireplace so you're containing all that heat in one room instead of all over the house? Do you have a gas range? If you have a gas range, can you ignite that range if you go off the power grid? It's just it's 100 things like that people need to think about and have these backup systems so that when they aren't on the power grid, to be able to go out on your patio, to go out in your backyard and make a go of it. What happens if the water supply where you live goes down and goes down for days and days and days? You can't flush a commode. You can't take a bath. You can get a little bit of water out of your water heater. You can get a little bit of water out of your water closets. But when that's gone, what happens? So you need to have a water supply. You need to have a 55-gallon drum of water in your garage. Or you may need to have 10 5-gallon containers of water. And if you've never practiced all of this, it's almost a waste of time anyway. This requires practice. You can talk to people about doing these things forever, but they've never, ever done it, and they wait until there is a crisis to do it. Generally, they're panicky. They've never done it before. Their confidence level is very, very low. And again, this goes back to the basics. Have you had your training, and have you planned to have whatever this emergency occur?
If you could talk to us a little bit about the practice part, you've focused, because I've asked you on a lot of the specific supplies and resources that people should set aside, but what types of practice do you see to be the most necessary to be able to maintain, calm and effectiveness under pressure?
Well, in a backcountry situation, you just literally need, with instructors, you need to go out and spend a weekend by yourself with your survival kit where you really got to go through these things, and then have those instructors available immediately thereafter so that you can ask them, this didn't work, that didn't work, and they can show you what you did wrong, why you couldn't get a fire going, why with, say, flint and steel, it seemed impossible to be able to get a fire going. And in the home situation, take a weekend and go turn the power off and tell everybody there's no water here. We have no power, we have no water. Now what are you going to do? And actually go through that from, say, Friday afternoon late until Sunday night. And it's an eye-opener. And you're not scared there because you got a fallback system. I don't know how to train people to overcome the fear. That's a tough one. And that's what I like about doing these little classes on putting people out by themselves in the woods for an overnight or two nights situation, because most people will have fears because they got fear of the darkness. They've got fear of every sound that they hear. They got the fear of the weather. They got the fear they don't have the competency to do these skills. They have mosquitoes eating on them, whatever the situation may be. A lot of people, like I say, never been alone before. Just being alone can be a big deal to people in today's world. And most people we found that are hunters, particularly that are lost, little children that are lost, people that have left a nursing home, for instance, they're scared that they're going to be ridiculed. They're scared they're going to be punished. They're scared that people are going to scold them when they are found. So they go to hiding from you. That makes it even more difficult. And we've had a lot of grown-ups that were hunters who were so concerned about being embarrassed because they got lost, and that people were going to jump on them because all these search parties had to go out there and everything. The way they overcame that was by hiding.
I didn't think of that one. Didn't expect that one. So back in the home front, one of the things I didn't hear you mention was about, you did mention about darkness being one of the sources of fear, but in some of the essential supplies, I didn't recall you talking anything other than your fire building that could create light, any other light sources or protection weapons, anything like that, or for hunting. Is there anything from fishing, hunting, or sources of light that would also be something to add to your preparedness plan?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And today we've got, for short-term survival, we've got these battery. We really got some high-tech battery lanterns now. And these high-tech battery lanterns are good for 72, 80, 90, 120 hours or so, depending on how little or how much you use them. And they don't create a lot of heat, so if you're in a safe room, for instance, they're not burning you up in there. They don't use oxygen, so you're not running out of an air supply, things like that. For longer-term lighting, of course, there's always the pressurized gas lanterns. And for even longer term than that, it's pretty easy to store kerosene. And if you've been trained in the use of kerosene lamps and the safety that's necessary to go with them, I grew up with kerosene lamps, so I know they work. You can learn to read and write by them if you need to. But there are many alternate lighting sources. Here at our house, we keep a big supply of long-term candles. And by using aluminum foil reflectors, you can use these long-term candles that basically don't drip wax all over the place, and you can get by with those. You can see the function at night. It's not great. It's not what we're accustomed to. It won't run your television by any means, but you can see. Now, when you get down talking about firearms and ways of securing game for food, and you get into the self-defensive side of it, which is could be a major portion of what we would talk about, you could go on for hours and hours and hours about which firearms to choose, what calibers, how much ammunition to store, where you live, do you have hunting skills, is hunting even available where you are, In a long-term situation where everybody that's got a gun is going to go out and try to kill every rabbit, squirrel, and deer that they find, how fast will the food be depleted? Those are big courses all into themselves. And where you live, your particular situation determines what kind of firepower you need or what kind of firearms and what calibers you would need.
Now, I will ask you, though, to weigh in on knife selection, because I happen to see in my research on some of your work that you actually produce a type of knife. Can you tell us about what kind of knife is the most effective and essential to have in an outdoor survival situation?
Well, in outdoor survival situations, you really need, if you have, of course, the knife you got in your hand is the best one in the world, regardless of what kind it is. But if you have a choice in what you carry, let's say you're a hunter or you're a fisherman or you kayak or whatever, I prefer, for a survival knife, a fixed blade knife. A knife is a full tang knife, which just simply means that the blade material goes on up into the end of the handles so that it's not going to break on you. And it needs to be a handle material that's virtually unbreakable. The knife that I designed, it's used for survival. It's got a blaze orange. It's high-tech plastic handle. And it's high carbon steel rather than a stainless steel. I like high carbon steel that's about a 58 Rockwell hardness, simply because you can sharpen it real quick and real easy. So I like a blade that's about a 4.5, 5-inch blade. I don't want a machete that's way too big, yet I don't want a little bitty flimsy blade that if you've got to split kindling with it, or you got to take a rock and beat on the backside of it to open up a coconut or whatever, I want one that's got enough backbone to do that. So, and then the other thing is you want a decent sheath to carry that knife in. You don't want some flimsy sheath that is real easy to lose your knife, because you get under a survival situation, you're under a lot of stress. It's real easy to lay things down. That's the reason for the blaze orange handles on the knives I designed. It's real easy for you to jump around and the thing fall out of your sheath and then you can't find it. This is the worst time in the world you're going to have to start losing equipment. So from a knife standpoint, that's what I prefer to have. And I've been in survival situations on my own due to the kind of work that I've done, where I've had to live 15, 20 days using the knife that I just described, and we came out just fine.
What about communication? You mentioned signaling with aluminum foil. Other types of signaling or any type of communication or communication techniques and equipment that you recommend? Yeah,
and I should have mentioned that in the little personal survival kit for backcountry survival. We always encourage people to get, there's a couple of whistles made that you can hear about a mile away. One is called the Fox 40 and one is called Storm. It's the same kind the military uses now. And these whistles will carry much further than the human voice. And, of course, it requires very little air to use them, and you can just blow them and blow them and blow them, and you suddenly won't be hoarse. The signal whistle is real good, especially people that are lost. They can hear the searchers calling their name, but they're way away. And these whistles, it's amazing how far you can hear them. The other thing we recommend is signal mirror, because helicopters are used so much today in search and rescue operations. And if you've been trained how to use a signal mirror, that thing will signal an airplane 20, 30 miles away if you need be. And we try to recommend everybody carry both a signal mirror and a signal whistle in any kind of survival kit they put together.
Anything else for people in their homes, or that people who might not live right close to relatives and loved ones but want to make sure that they have a way of reaching out to each other or connecting, having a plan, how to meet up, that sort of thing, the ability to connect and network either in a neighborhood or farther than that to relatives?
Well, you've got several possibilities, you know. Generally, the first thing that goes out when we have these bad storms, and if we had EMP, if we had a cyber attack or any number of things, your cell towers are gone. and your phone system is gone. I have a son who's an engineer with AT&T, and they work on this all the time, trying to figure out better ways to keep communication up if we lose everything, but they're not there yet. And so if your relatives that you're concerned about, your kids' school is 20, 30 miles away, or any kind of situation like that, then if cell towers are down, if the phone's not working, then you better have thought this out ahead of time. You're going to get on your bicycle and try to meet them somewhere, and it may take you a while to get there. What do they do? Who do they trust? Who do they not trust? Same situation for, let's say, your grandmother lives a couple of miles away. Have you ever discussed with her? She may be elderly, she may be feeble, and she may get frightened very easy when the power goes off. Have you ever discussed with her what you're going to do to come rescue her if a bad situation were to occur? And again, it's this planning thing. You've got to think about your situation. You've got to put plans in shape where you can, over a period of time, communicate one way or another. You know, you got your ham operators. That works fine as long as you've got a way of powering that radio. But if that radio's gone, forget that. Satellite phones, same situation. If you lose the power grid, you have an EMP that basically fries everything electronic, then all of those goodies are gone. That's not part of your plan anymore.
Have you recommended to anyone who has loved ones that are at a greater distance than just a few miles, as far as having a meetup plan or being able to get across country in emergency or disaster situation, if they wanted to travel actually across state lines, that sort of thing, in a disaster situation?
Well, yeah, we've got family members. I've got a daughter that lives in Atlanta who is, due to MS, she's severely handicapped. And what we put in place for her is depend on people that's right there. We're not going to be, in a bad situation, we're not going to be able to get there from where we live. It may take days and days and days, and we may be so involved in just trying to maintain day-to-day life where we are, we may not be able to get there. And we've gone through with she and her husband, what to do, how to do, when to do, who is their backup system, who's going to look after them, because we're not able to get there. I have a son who's a radiologist in a hospital up in another state, and we've discussed with him. He carries in his vehicle, he's got a bug-out bag, for the lack of a better term, and we've had long discussions because the hospital he works in is some training along these lines. If he needed to get from there, let's say they shut the hospital down, he needed to get to there to where our compound is, have a bicycle ready to go, put his pack on, and it's going to take him 3 days to get here, and what routes to take where he may not encounter hostile people on the way to get here. And again, everybody's got to look at their own situation. There's no two that are exactly alike. And I think that's the thing that so many people look for easy answers, especially in long-term survival, and there are no easy answers. You've got to evaluate your situation, and you've got to do a lot of self-training yourself, a lot of self-planning, and try to network with other people. I'm very fortunate. I live in a remote rural area where everybody around me thinks the way that I think. And we have breakfast discussions over various scenarios. We talk about these things, and that's about as prepared as you can get.
How do you deal with people that have family members and loved ones that they care about deeply and want to engage in these discussions, but the other people really aren't showing a lot of interest? How do you broach that subject? How do you ease people into conversation in a way that doesn't seem like a real downer for everybody involved?
Well, as you well know, that's called normalcy bias. And so many people in today's world have had it easy all of their life. They don't think anything is going to go wrong. And most of them think their government is going to take good care of them. And those people are very, very difficult to communicate these things with. I have some in my own family that are that way, even though they were brought up in a lifestyle that I tried to raise all my children to be self-sufficient, to think about when things go completely haywire, what do you do? How can you be on your own and not have to depend on everybody? But normalcy bias is something I run into everywhere. And all you can do is to try to give them situations that could occur, and generally they'll shoot them down. You start talking about EMP, nobody even first knows what you're talking about. Second of all, they think it will never happen. And you talk about a cyber attack that would shut our grid down. They talk about the government's going to protect us from all that. That's no big deal. So I don't have a solution on how you break through to those people. I was at a Memorial Day picnic yesterday where the subject of survival came up, and it was amazing what percentage of people there think their government's going to take care of them no matter what happens. You have an EMP event, you've got no government.
And we've certainly seen from Hurricane Katrina or other desperate situations that have occurred, what kinds of confusion, inefficiencies, all kinds of things that enter into huge delays that can really make for a humanitarian crisis. So even in the best of situations where there's a functioning emergency management agency or something, if there's a regional outage of any major scope, it can really bring systems and society, the orderly functioning of society, to its knees. And we've seen that play out where there's drastic shortages of water and flooding and that sort of thing.
Generally, it takes about 3 days. We had a real good example where I live, not where my house currently is. At that time, this has been a good many years ago, at that time we lived in a fairly large city in a nice neighborhood, and tornadoes took the power system out. We were without power for 7 days and nights. And the area I lived in they were all engineers with NASA in the defense industry. In about 24 hours, none of them had ever been exposed to any kind of survival situation. They had no backup food, they had no backup water, and we were running a restaurant on the back of our house just to try to get people fed and get them some water and get them to calm down and get used to not having the air conditioner on. By the second day, most people were out of gasoline. They couldn't get fuel for their vehicles, and this was in the summer, early summer, and they couldn't get ice. They were losing stuff out of the refrigerator. They had no idea about making jerky or anything else, and so they got food spoilage. The generators on the water plant had gone down, so you had a real bad situation with human waste sanitation. And real quick, they'd start giving lessons on how do you make a temporary outhouse using a plastic bag. And by the third day, we started having people out of the area beginning to venture out into some of the nicer neighborhoods to get the things they hadn't been able to get in the past. Now, that's as clean as I can make that. So it takes about 3 days before you get where you've got a fairly serious problem.
In that scenario, as it played out, were you able to remain in your home the whole time?
Yeah, we had no problem. We were ready. We had a portable generator that would run the deep freeze, the refrigerator. We had enough lights to do us. We had enough backup fuel for the generator. We keep a year's supply of food on hand all the time. We keep about 500 gallons of water on hand all the time. We keep our medications 90 days out all the time. Because of the business I'm in, or as firearms and protection and all of that's concerned, we're way ahead of most people in that department. And fortunately, we were blessed to have enough so that we could help our neighbors who were just totally freaked out.
Well, Wayne, if people want to find more about your work, and you've certainly got a huge lifetime body of work that they can take advantage of, where can they find you?
Okay, the best way to find what I do is just do a Google search for J. Wayne Fears, Amazon. Most of my books are available. I've got an author's page on Amazon, and they'll go there where this book's on making jerky or survival or swamp camping or, any one of 24 other subjects. My books are there. So just Google Amazon J. Wayne Fears, and they'll find them.
And before we let you go, if you have one final anything that we haven't asked you that you'd like to leave with our viewers so that they can a thought to take with them and to help encourage them as they move forward?
Well, everybody can become I won't say a survival expert, but everybody can become a survivor if they will sit down and think about all the situations where they live that could occur, and then take the time and prepare yourself for them, whether it's putting aside enough freeze-dried food, enough water, getting your medications out 90 days so that for short term you've got enough medications that you need. But the thing to do is on some weekends when television is really boring is sit the family down and kind of talk through these things and get the whole family involved in it, make it a family project. Too many of the people that I have worked with, let's say, just to use an example, the dad was really into this, but everybody else in the family was too busy with soccer games and everything else, and suddenly when they were trapped by a storm, everybody in the family except Dad is panicking, and they're not working as a team, they're working against one another. So take a long weekend when it's kind of television boring and you don't have a lot to do. Make it a fun weekend for the family to get to know one another and think through what happens where you live, what could happen where you live. Are you prepared? Are you not prepared? And the one big thing we didn't discuss is anybody that's building a new home, they ought to build it in today's world. They need to build it thinking about all of these things and take advantage of the technology we have today to build a home that could be self-sustaining without any power or without any outside utilities.
Well, if we could make a date with you to call back on a time when you could walk us through what that survival home of the future would look like, we love that opportunity.
Yeah, what I would do there, Donegan, is I can just walk you through what we did. And this would work in any part of the United States. We just took advantage of modern technology, and so that if we didn't have central heat and air, if we didn't have any electricity and the water did come to us, we've got all those things one way or another. The way we design the home, it can be cool in the summer, warm in the winter. I would enjoy talking about that for an hour or so.
Excellent. We'll make it happen. So thank you very much, Wayne Fears, for being with us here on Reluctant Preppers.
My pleasure, and have a good evening.